The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. On this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Darkest England by Idries Shah. 4. Certainly not from Trinidad. Follies. England, a happy land we know, where follies naturally grow. Churchill, the Ghost. Aplomb is French for perpendicularity, as of a lead weight on a line, self-possession. And sang-froid, of course, means coolness of blood. It is probable that the English prefer to use these foreign terms for something which is widespread among them, because it is bad form to boast of one's own coolness. That is, it sounds better to say, "By Jove, that Frenchman certainly has aplomb," to show that one approves of the characteristic, than to claim to possess it oneself. It is left to others to make further inferences. This is part of the amateur status preference in England. A compatriot of mine was told, at his first Oxford tutorial, "You are not only here to learn, try to acquire the appearance of not bothering to work at anything. Let others boast of their studiousness." It is aplomb which other peoples associate with the English. An American joke may be taken as the standard text. An Englishman is standing at the long bar of a saloon in the Wild West. Suddenly, a sun-crazed outlaw rushes in, straight through the batwing doors, firing into the air and howling, "Get out of here, you coyotes!" Everyone dives for the floor or stampedes out of the place. The Englishman, however, is still standing there as the newcomer skids up to him with staring eyes. "By Jove," says the Englishman, "you were right. There were a lot of coyotes in here, weren't there?" Aplomb may be mistaken for madness or insensitivity, but that may be all to the good. One opinion on this was given me by Marshal Sirdar Shah Wali Khan, our king's uncle and for many years Afghan ambassador in Paris and London. An insensitive Englishman is a problem, he said, but a sensitive one is a disaster. A baffled East European once reported to me an experience which, for him, proved British insensitivity, or lack of manners, he was not sure which. He had been visiting the Foreign Office on some routine matter connected with his embassy, then, "This Englishman said to me, 'One needs something strong,' and he put some strong alcohol in a glass, gin it was, a very strong drink. Then he added water. Now it was no longer strong. But he wasn't finished, tovarish. He put some lime juice into the drink, which of course made it acid, and then into the acid he put sugar, I suppose to make it sweet. Finally he picked up the glass and spoke. He said, 'Good health,' but though it was my health he was talking about, he drank the stuff himself. Had he no manners?" I seem to have been hearing about English manners all my life. Some people claim that they have exquisite manners, others that they have none at all. The nearest that I have been able to get to an answer is that both claims seem to be true. Harold Nicholson puts it like this. Admittedly, our manners, when we first began to have manners in the 15th century, were the product of foreign importations rather than any autochthonous growth. The encoded message here to those learned in Englishry is that good behaviour is not native, and therefore can be adopted or abandoned at will. But was the Slav's assessment right? Did his experience with the Englishman have any connection with sensitivity or manners? I asked a former high official of the Foreign and Colonial Office whether such an anecdote could be true or even possible. He shot his starched lace cuffs and gave me a charming smile. "Yes, indeedy, old boy. You see, the fellow was obviously showing aplomb. That Rusky might have been KGB, trying to find out something. So, how to cope? Use up a bit of time so that your secretary can come in to say you've another appointment, then shake his hand, get him off the premises, that kind of thing. What's the fella's name? Igor Voyensky, I said. There you are, then. His uncle is first deputy clown of the Council of Lunatics over there, something of the sort. I'd watch my step with him. Insensitivity to Igor's desire for a drink, but you must agree great awareness of more important factors. I acquired my own reputation for aplomb very accidentally, and I have seen English poise which might have been interpreted as something else, nervelessness, for example, in operation so often that I am tempted to trace its origins to similar casual happenings. The difference between English and foreign aplomb may well be that the foreigner is trying to practice it, while the Englishman reaches for it automatically. I probably wouldn't even have noticed my own aplomb if a Finn who was standing by, earnest student of the English as he was, had not identified it and complimented me. In a stately salon at a London diplomatic occasion, I was watching the usual cosmopolitan scrum trampling the chicken sandwiches into the carpet and bolting the caviar in the usual way, when an Englishman, who had evidently eaten that day and was therefore more detached than the other guests, approached me. "I say," he said, "are you from Trinidad?" "No, actually," I responded. "Are you?" He looked at me for a moment, first in bewilderment and then with annoyance. "Trinidad?" he snapped. "I most certainly am not." He lost his head, as the Afghans say, trying to save his ears. This was when the Finn came up and congratulated me. At least, he did so the moment the Englishman had stalked off. "That was Sir Geoffrey Furlong, British Minister to Bulgaria," he said, "and you certainly saw him off." So I got the credit, the Finn spread the word, for being a cool customer, quite without merit. Years later, I still meet people who have heard of my great feat of aplomb. I am sure that the Finn made the same sort of mistake as Paul Gallico, who once wrote in the New York Times about the terrible way in which the British were calculatedly rude. This they may be from time to time, but I believe that it is rarer than Gallico thought. Mostly, when I've noticed, it has just looked like rudeness. In fact, I've almost certainly caught the habit myself. Gallico's remark is worth noting in full, especially by those who are planning to go to the United States, or by the 2.5 million Americans who visit England each year. No one can be as calculatedly rude as the British, which amazes Americans, who do not understand studied insult and can only offer abuse as a substitute. The English, you may have noticed, constantly complain about one another's rudeness. So what are the rest of us carrying on about? Any exceptionable behaviour is not targeted at us. It is just a local hazard. Note, quite often an Englishman will stand up and challenge the entire nation of which he is a citizen with what would be fighting talk anywhere else. An English Member of Parliament, quoted in the Daily Telegraph of the 29th of November 1986, calls his own people very dirty, very undisciplined, and a nation of moaners. Currently, a great argument is raging between commuters and Victoria Station ticket collectors. Each party calls the other rude. If Furlong, the non-Trinidadian Englishman, had not been so obviously put out by my answer, the Finn might well have attributed his disclaimer to calculated insult. Try repeating Sir Geoffrey's words in a slow and complacent manner. There you are. It sounds like aplomb, or rudeness, or both, doesn't it? For me, it is the lesson which counts. Just as the apprentice traditionally learns by watching the master artisan, so do the English absorb aplomb from real life. Indeed, the process may not even require special abilities, only the right mindset. Coolness is all. We used to keep 2 English donkeys, Boney and Claude, given to wandering unless kept in a paddock surrounded by a wire fence. One day they escaped after watching our cats getting in and out under the wire, and then forcing a way out in a similar manner. They just didn't know that donkeys simply do not do things like that. Non-linear thinking helps. Those who do not learn from aplomb situations may be regarded as less than English donkeys. I have, I believe, actually witnessed a first emergence of aplomb learning under field conditions and involving some Englishmen. I was on a railway journey from Italy to France, and the train was crowded. In the middle of the night, some tired and unruly Swiss army men climbed aboard and found that even the corridors were full. In our compartment were 3 young English backpackers, their impedimenta piled high just where the Swiss soldiers wanted to stand. Almost nonchalantly, and as the train was passing through a tunnel in the Alps, the Swiss opened a window and threw all this baggage out. The Englishmen looked at one another, their faces red. Then one of them, as if remarking on the weather and staring straight at one of the Swiss, said, "You are no gentleman, sir." The Swiss took no notice at all, merely settling themselves more comfortably and gnawing at their bread and wurst. That wasn't aplomb, they didn't understand English. But a Frenchman, also in our compartment, who obviously understood the words, cried, "Bravo! What a display of sang-froid!" One of the young Englishmen said to another, "I must remember that. Might come in useful sometime." It was this experience, and more specifically the use of the word gentleman, which caused me to seek out Harold Nicholson to get a fix on who or what a gentleman might be. Although born in Tehran and having served as a diplomat in the Middle East, nobody could deny that he was very English. His answer, though confusing to a mere foreigner, was specific, unequivocal. The ancient Greek gentleman, the kalos kagathos of Athens, existed only for 80 years. The Roman equivalent flourished between 98 BC and 46 BC, a period of half a century. The Englishman lived between 1770 and 1830, that is to say, for 60 years. I wondered at the time whether this was a joke. He was, after all, the author of the English sense of humour. But Sir Harold argued the case for these datings seriously, and published his contentions in his Good Behaviour in 1955. Aplomb is often, though not always, related to the actual words used, as I remember from an event of my childhood. Fortunately, I can recall it in detail, though at the time I did not know what the phenomenon was called. It happened in the Afghan mountains. A distinguished Englishman was due to visit us, and considerable preparations had been made to provide a welcome appropriate to his dignity, and also to what we regarded as ours. Now, our place was well enough fortified, but it was at the top of a winding road, at times infested by outlaws who attacked people as a matter of course. Their motto was, "O Daradad Manchira Nabagiram." He's got it, why should I not take it? On the morning of the visit, a fairly wild bandit was in the area, and he spotted the Englishman's Rolls-Royce. With a cry of delight at the prospect of sport and gain, this ruffian fired a warning shot, which shattered a wing mirror, and began to leap from crag to crag downhill towards his prey. The Indian driver of the car jumped out and rolled into the ditch, teeth chattering, as the English celebrity sat becalmed, eyes riveted upon the advancing figure. There seemed no hope for him. Suddenly, like a scene from a film, another shot rang out, and the bandit fell, drilled clean through the head. Then, from behind a boulder, also tripping from rock to rock, came a stocky, middle-aged figure, clad in deerstalker hat and Norfolk jacket, a hunting rifle in his hand. It was the formidable Sirdar Faiz Mohammed Khan, Zikria, our neighbour and a crack shot with a Mannlicher, who had spent a lot of time in England and spoke the language well. As he came up to the Englishman, the Sirdar swept off his cap and said, "Good morning, my dear sir. The obstacle to your progress having been removed, you may now proceed." But you needn't have killed him, spluttered our guest, which was quite quick thinking, all things considered. I had to, on grounds of hospitality, said the Afghan. The fellow was being almost discourteous. Between them, the two got the shivering driver back behind the wheel, and the first thing that I knew about it all was the rolls entering our courtyard to the sound of trumpets, and then the Englishman, white to the gills, muttering, "Almost discourteous, almost discourteous, almost discourteous," like a holy mantram. My father said, "Terribly sorry about that spot of bother. Lot of it about at this time of year, you know." Having recovered his composure and relaxing after the feast, our guest asked, "What would His Excellency have done if the ruffian had actually been discourteous instead of almost?" My father said, "The Sirdar would have crossed that bridge when he came to it." Now I come to think of it, I can't decide which of them had the greater aplomb. Although the story beats my Trinidadian one, the principle is there, and you can't find many mountain bandits in London. Here is a report from the august Daily Telegraph, perhaps published for instructional purposes because of its aplomb content. A London employer told a typist that her work was good, but her spelling was bad. If in doubt, she should consult the dictionary. "That wouldn't work," she said. "I'm never in any doubt." You cannot have a real aplomb situation without something else. This something is defeat for the opponent, or an indication that you don't understand that you have been bested. And every demonstration of aplomb must be low-key. If you allow yourself to get excited or start to argue or boast, you may win the exchange, but still lose face. Many people who fancy themselves intellectuals seek to trap one into wrangling, I think because this preempts the use of the aplomb weapon. At one Hampstead party, a voluble English collectivist newspaper writer berated me, as an Afghan, for being a tribal nobody, medievally trying to fight socialism and prevent the gallant Soviet army and fraternal Russian advisors from sorting out our problems. We were primitive, that was our trouble. I said, "Primitive? But it was a man from my part of the world who pioneered algorithm more than 1,000 years ago. He was called Al-Khwarizmi. The very word logarithm, some say, is your attempt at pronouncing his name, and it took 600 years before people in England could throw off Roman numerals and use those of our scientists." Since 3 or 4 of the people listening were scientists, I reckoned that this cool-headed, learned rejoinder would align their sympathy with me. But the political expert was just as quick. "Logarithms," he said bitterly. "Without them, we would have had no nuclear bombs and fewer crazy scientists, servants of the imperialists." Quite neat, I thought. It answered me and outflanked the scientists in one. Now, at this point, I should have said something which would raise a laugh, like asking why they had scientists in the USSR, or else disconnected from the whole thing. I hesitated, and one of the others intervened. The Russophile writer had, just before, been extolling the virtues of UNESCO, and the scientist held up a hand. "Just a moment. Did you know that there is one Afghan who has received no less than 5 international first prizes for his work in UNESCO's World Book Year?" The fellow traveller tried a bit of aplomb. "Yes, I know that, of course, and I'm sure that if he had been here tonight he would have agreed with every word I have said." "I'm not too sure about that," said the other man. "He's Idries Shah, the man you're trying to browbeat, who's standing beside you." Very neat. My proper course now would have been to say absolutely nothing. But there was a picture in my mind of the Russians in Afghanistan, of bombed villages, napalmed children, murder, horror, evil, and I knew that I was going to say something that I should not. "Now, will you shut up?" I heard myself inquire. The Soviets were barbarians. I was the civilized one. Everyone moved away from me. My ally the scientist had won a battle, and I had, through not underplaying, lost the war. The English law of public relations says that you can hire someone to boast for you, but you may not do it yourself. I'd lost my cool just like Sir Geoffrey, the man who was not from Trinidad. And if I did not need to get heated, I have since discovered neither did he. You see, it really is all right to be from Trinidad. I have this on the authority of Charles Kingsley, who says in At Last, Chapter 3, Trinidad is loyal with occasional grumblings, as is the right of freeborn Britons. Of course, neither Furlong nor I knew about this at the time of our encounter, but it is registered here for reference. Parties offer great opportunities for fieldwork in the matter of repartee, of which aplomb is the mainspring. Some of my best material comes from the soirees given by that indefatigable explorer and society hostess, Mrs. Frances Fisher. You could always reckon on finding a colourful throng at her place. At one such at home, I was standing next to a Scottish chief in full regalia and a haughty-looking English officer in tight-fitting mess kit. The Englishman looked at the man with kilt and sporran and asked disdainfully, "How did you get in here?" The Scot rumbled. I showed my invitation card at the door. Then, examining the officer's uniform, he added, "That's a monkey jacket, isn't it? No doubt you shinned up the drainpipe in it, and that's why you're interested in the matter." The soldier went blue in the face. No cool, so no aplomb, no repartee. The Highlander had learnt that in England you have to keep one jump ahead, or perhaps it was Cro-Magnon instinct which came to his aid. My Scottish author friend Lewis Spence was very hot on the theory that the Scots were Cro-Magnon by blood and superior to the Neanderthal English. Instinct, which sometimes produces situations that can only be explained in terms of the Marx Brothers, is one of the factors which usually enable the English to keep ahead of the game. All foreigners will know what I mean. Sometimes the Angle gains and holds the initiative while the foreigner is still trying to work out what is going on and why. We think that cunning is at work, or that a madness has seized the English, or that they are deliberately trying to confuse us, to name but three. Those of us who have seen as much of it as I have, however, realize that the fault is in us. Two un-English weaknesses, premature assumptions and trying too hard to classify things, are getting in the way. Outlandishly, we others demand lucidity and understanding. I leave you to decide the meaning of a prime example of unflappability for yourself, unless you care to adopt my own reading, that all will be understood only in the fullness of time. A powerful English captain of industry was once trying to contact me urgently all over the country, his henchpeople leaving messages everywhere they thought I might be. Eventually his private secretary located me, and we had a telephone conversation. "Yes, I am Idries Shah. You say that Sir Rampant Turbid wants to speak to me." "That's right. I have been trying everywhere. He will be pleased you came through. I'll have to see if he is free. Who shall I say is calling?" Who is calling? My head swam. I'm calling. I'm the man you've been looking for everywhere, and asking for by name, and whom you've just recognized by his name when he called you up, for goodness sake. Perhaps I'd heard wrong. "What's that?" I asked. "I said, who shall I say is calling?" I took a deep breath. "Madam," I said with great calm, "you can say that it is the devil. I'll just spell it. D-E-V-I-L. Back came her voice, cheery, confident, self-possessed. "Just a moment, Mr. Devil. I'll put you through." I've tried really hard to puzzle it out. Aplomb, or perhaps frequent calls from the nether regions, could account for the lady's lack of surprise. Or maybe Sir Rampant's friends change their names all the time. Finally, I decided on the fullness of time solution. I have not met this extraordinarily cool lady. Perhaps I should avoid her, because Roget, in his Thesaurus, associates inexcitability with frigidity. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation and is copyright 2019. All rights reserved.